Christine, so I understand that you studied climatology, or essentially at a university here in Ottawa, Canada. Which one was it?
Carleton University, Environmental Studies and Environmental Sciences.
Fascinating. Now, if I understand you correctly, that there were certain concepts that you were pre-directed before the beginning of the course to have a certain outcome. Could you explain what that was, please?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were supposed to take about 6 credits per semester, and at least 4 of the credits were chosen climatology, oceanography, geology fields that were focusing on anthropogenic caused climate change.
What is anthropogenic?
Caused by man.
Okay.
And it was quite interesting because in my 3rd semester, they actually forced us to take 2 climate change courses in the same semester that both had dissenting viewpoints, which were completely polar opposites. One of them was the mainstream view that fossil fuels and carbon dioxide were causing global warming. That was anthropogenic caused climate change.
So in other words, human activity were causing this.
Yeah. And if you did not say that you believed that in that class, that you would fail.
Okay, wait, before you go further, I got to stop you right there. You are saying that all work in these courses must conform to a predetermined outcome. So this would not be reason-based conclusions, but it would be conclusion-based reasoning. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, tell me more, please.
Well, they discouraged you from asking questions or questioning the data at all.
How? How did they discourage you?
So in exams and stuff, they would only give us multiple choice questions, and they wouldn't let us elaborate at all. So that the questions would be based on what is causing the climate to change. And in one course, you had no option but to put human beings and the burning of fossil fuels and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, not just greenhouse gases, but specifically carbon dioxide, which what we learned later actually has the same warming effect on the atmosphere as water vapor. It has a 1 times warming effect, carbon dioxide, and it really is nothing when you compare it to nitrous or methane, which is a 14 or 28 times warming effect on the atmosphere. Right. But yet strangely focused on only carbon dioxide.
Interesting. So in essence, in order to pass this course, you must present answers that would conform to a human-caused global warming.
That narrative, or else you fail.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, in that same semester, I was privileged enough to take another climate change course at exactly the same time, where we were allowed to look at evidence and come to our own conclusions.
And who was a professor in that course?
Tim Ball was the acting professor. He did a bunch of guest lectures. He was a oceanography.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Dr. Tim Ball is a PhD of actual paleoclimatology.
Yep.
Okay.
And he actually showed us a lot of evidence in paleoclimatology, including soil samples, ice core samples from Vostok. He showed us pollen samples from lakes, tree ring samples, and all these things that give a more complete picture of the global climate, going back 100,000 years.
Okay. And how did his course work out?
Well, he was trying to expose, Michael Mann and his hockey stick graph.
Michael Mann is I don't know what his actual credentials are, but he's the fellow that produced the hockey stick curve that indicated that imminently there'd be a giant spike in world temperature, which was going to result in, a great climate catastrophe from which all of the policies that Western governments have formed was based on. Have I got that more or less right?
Absolutely. I think that's where we're going with the carbon credits and taxes.
It's all from Mann's grasp.
Yes.
Okay, now Mann is the guy who was he tried to sue Mark Stein and Dr. Tim Ball. Have I got that right?
Yeah, for libel and slander.
Because they said his graph was nonsense, and he lost both cases.
He lost both cases, and actually the Supreme Court said that because he refused to actually show his evidence and findings and his research, that he was guilty of fraud.
Well, that seems reasonable because he wouldn't show any of the science behind his graph. Fascinating.
But Tim Ball showed us the science behind his graph, and he told the class to make up their own mind and what they think. And when you have a class that's focused on one data set where the carbon dioxide happens to follow an increase in temperature, but yet you choose to ignore the thousands of years before that, where carbon dioxide was high and temperature was low, and temperature was high and carbon dioxide was low. You purposefully omit that from your studies. That it was very misleading, and they actually forced us to work with an incomplete data set, even though we knew that there was more complete data available, but we weren't allowed to work with it.
So your courses, but other than Tim Ball's course, at other courses you took at Ottawa U, you would fail. At Carleton. Was it Carleton University?
Yeah. But Tim Ball was an acting professor from Ottawa U.
From Ottawa U. But when you studied at Carleton, you studied climate science.
Yeah.
You had to produce answers and papers and so on that accepted a preconceived notion that humans were causing specifically warming of the climate by these activities, or you would fail. Is that right?
Yep. And disregard all of the other recognized academic studies and just only go with the narrative that it's what the professors say, and you can only use the references and scholarly articles that they say that you can use that are acceptable, when there is a system set up for acceptable scholarly articles, and they're only choosing to follow one set of data when other sets are available. That's not getting an entire picture.
It doesn't actually sound like science. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, not being a scientist, but I believe the whole point of science is to come to a conclusion based on looking at all the available evidence and then reasoning your way toward a model with predictive value.
Right.
And it sounds to me like what they did is the exact opposite, which is begin with a conclusion that has no supporting evidence and then insist that people accept or invent evidence to support that conclusion.
Well, and it's classic wishful thinking.
I beg your pardon?
It's classic wishful thinking.
Right.
Yeah, so they want it to be true, therefore they'll push the narrative.
I wonder what would, that's clearly not Greek thought, it's clearly not science. I wonder what kind of thinking and what kind of models would use that sort of kind of conclusion-based reasoning. Christine, thank you so much for being brave enough to come out and talk about what went on in these courses.
No problem. Anytime.